She changed the locks, packed my clothes in trash bags, and smiled, like she'd already won everything. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just turned around and walked away in silence, my hand gripping the court papers. 3 months later, at that very same house, she opened the door and saw me standing there, next to a man in a suit, holding official court documents. And he said, "Ms. Clarissa Dale, you've been served. My name is Janelle Price, and this is the story of how the woman I trusted most threw me out like yesterday's trash." We lived in Savannah, Georgia, Clarissa and I. 5 years together, 5 years of laughter, weekend markets, paint on our clothes, dog hair on the couch, shared mortgage stress, whispered "I love yous," and dreams pinned to the same bedroom wall. But here's the thing, the house, it was only in her name. I know what you're thinking. That was mistake number one. But I was in love. And when you're in love, you don't imagine betrayal. You imagine growing old. You imagine Sunday pancakes. You imagine safety. We bought that house together. She put down the down payment. I covered the closing costs. We split the bills. I paid for the new HVAC system when the old one choked in July. I landscaped the whole damn backyard myself. Every flower bed. Every stepping stone. It was ours. But only one name sat on the deed. And that name wasn't mine. I never thought she'd use that against me, until the day I came home, and the key wouldn't turn. I twisted the knob. Tried again. At first, I thought it was jammed. Maybe the wood swelled from the humidity. You know Georgia in June. Then I noticed my plants on the porch were gone. My welcome mat gone. The small blue ceramic turtle I kept beside the door, shattered. Something wasn't right. I rang the doorbell, and she opened it, Clarissa, hair curled, lipstick red, holding a glass of wine like she was hosting a dinner party. She looked me up and down, suitcase still in my hand from a weekend trip to visit my mother. And she said, "Oh, you're back." Not hi, not "I missed you," not even "Why didn't you call?" Just cold, indifferent. I said, "Did you change the locks?" She smirked, took a sip of wine, and nodded. "You don't live here anymore, Janelle?" Just like that. I stood there, dumbfounded, my voice caught in my throat. "What are you talking about?" She stepped aside only slightly, just enough for me to see the inside. All my things, shoved into black trash bags, dumped by the stairs like donations waiting for Goodwill. My books, my clothes, my shoes, even the little ceramic mug I painted for her on our second anniversary, chipped and discarded. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears. She said, "I talked to a lawyer. Technically, you have no claim. The house is in my name. You never paid into the mortgage directly. It's done. We're done." I wanted to scream, to grab her, shake her, ask her how 5 years could mean so little. But I didn't. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just nodded, picked up 2 trash bags labeled J. She had the audacity to label them and walked away. Checked into a cheap motel off I-16, room 204. It smelled like mildew and disappointment. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the beige wall, feeling erased. But somewhere beneath the ache, something sharper stirred. Anger, no, not yet. Resolve. I opened my laptop and typed 6 words into the search bar. Tenant rights, Georgia, unmarried property dispute. And that was the beginning. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there staring at the peeling ceiling of that motel room while the hum of the old AC unit rattled in the corner like an exhausted breath. Clarissa thought she'd won, that I would just disappear, quietly, shamefully, like some forgotten phase. But what she didn't know was that while she poured herself another glass of red and scrolled through dating apps in our living room, I was building my case. In Georgia, there's this thing called equitable interest. It doesn't matter if your name's not on the deed if you've contributed financially, significantly, or consistently to a property. You might have a claim. And guess what? I had 5 years' worth of receipts. I pulled them all up from cloud storage, screenshots of wire transfers, bank statements showing payments for repairs, invoices for the contractor I hired when the back deck was collapsing, Photos of me repainting the kitchen cabinets, brush in hand, paint on my nose. Clarissa had the deed, sure, but I had proofy. The next morning, I called the law office of Melissa Harding, a civil litigation attorney in downtown Savannah. Her assistant answered, asked me a few questions, and scheduled me for that Thursday. When I walked into Melissa's office, she greeted me with a firm handshake and eyes that didn't pity me. They scanned me like a chessboard. I told her everything, every detail, every betrayal, every bill. And when I finished, she looked at me and said the first sentence that made me breathe again. You have a case, and a strong one. She explained we could file for constructive trust, a legal claim recognizing my financial and domestic contributions to the property. Not only could I demand compensation, I could request occupancy rights. I nodded, slowly, carefully. It felt like the first real step on solid ground. Over the next 6 weeks, we built the file. Clarissa kept partying, posting selfies in the backyard, hosting brunch with her new tribe. She probably thought I was sulking in some other city. She didn't even block me. I watched it all unfold. And with every mimosa toast she posted, my motivation sharpened. Melissa filed the suit. We served notice to Clarissa's address, that same house, and let me tell you, she didn't take it well. I heard from mutual friends that she screamed, threw things, said I was crazy and desperate. She even tried to call me once, left a voicemail that began with, "What the hell is your problem?" and ended in a long string of curse words. I didn't answer. Didn't need to. The court date was set, 9:00 a.m. at the Chatham County Courthouse. The morning of the hearing, I wore a charcoal blazer and carried a manila folder filled with 5 years of quiet proof. Clarissa showed up late, wearing heels too tall, sunglasses too big, and a sneer that reeked of arrogance. She sauntered in like it was a brunch reservation, not a legal proceeding. The judge, an older black woman with reading glasses on a chain, wasn't impressed. She asked Clarissa to sit, then turned to me. "Ms. Price, you may begin." Melissa stood and began laying it out, timeline, payments, documents, photos, one by one. Clarissa rolled her eyes, interrupted, called me just a guest at one point. The judge raised a hand. "Ms. Dale, one more outburst and I'll hold you in contempt." Clarissa shut up. For the first time in her life, probably. Then came my turn to speak. I stood up, hands trembling slightly. "I'm not here because I want revenge," I said. "I'm here because I built a home and got erased. Silently, like I was never there." I turned toward the judge, but I was there. I was the one who planted the rose garden out front. I was the one who installed the ceiling fans in July. I was the one who cooked dinner in that kitchen and paid to repair the plumbing when it flooded in the winter. I was there, and I have a right to be recognized. The courtroom was silent. Even Clarissa didn't move. The judge leaned back, looked over the papers, tapped her pen once, then again. "Finally," she said, "I'm granting temporary joint occupancy and ordering evaluation of the contributions made by Ms. Price. We'll reconvene in 30 days to determine the division of interest." Translation: I was legally allowed to go back. Back into the house, back into the space she thought she'd stolen forever. Clarissa's jaw dropped. I didn't smile. I just nodded. As I walked out of that courthouse, the sunlight hit my face like something sacred. I called a locksmith, made an appointment to have new keys cut, and filed for partial ownership rights under Georgia's property equity statutes. I didn't move in that day. I wasn't ready. But the door, it was mine to open again, and she knew it. I didn't walk back into that house with a victory smile. I walked in with silence, a silence so heavy it bent the air between us. Clarissa was sitting on the couch when I opened the door. Same couch we bought at that vintage place on Whitaker Street. The same one I had spent hours reupholstering with my bare hands. She looked up, eyes wide, like she'd seen a ghost. I didn't say anything. I just walked past her, into what used to be our bedroom. My fingers brushed the edge of the dresser, still mine, though she'd moved it slightly, like she'd tried to erase my side of the room. But ghosts don't leave quietly, and neither did I. The court order allowed me to reclaim my place in the house while the evaluation continued. It wasn't about comfort, it was about presence, and I was determined she'd feel every second of it. Clarissa tried to act unaffected. At first, She stomped around like she owned the floorboards, slammed cabinet doors, blared music, brought over friends late at night. But I'd learned something during those long weeks in that cheap motel. Power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's in the paperwork. I had already submitted a supplemental filing itemizing every purchase I made over the years. Not just the HVAC and the deck repairs, but the monthly utilities I paid directly, the receipts for the new windows I helped install, the rugs, the outdoor grill, even the damn curtain rods. Melissa, my attorney, said, "The more you document, the more they owe you." Clarissa didn't know it yet, but the financial noose was tightening. 3 days after I moved back in, she tried to intimidate me. I was in the kitchen, making tea. She leaned in the doorway with that fake smile energy and said, "You really don't get how pathetic this is. Do you?" I looked at her, calm, measured. "I get it," I said. "I just don't care what you think anymore." And I turned back to my kettle. That was the shift. Because suddenly, she wasn't in control anymore. Her words didn't land, her tactics didn't rattle. I was there not as her ex, not as her burden, but as her equal co-occupant. Backed by law. Meanwhile, the property appraisers came, inspected everything, measured contributions, took notes, asked questions. One even said, "You did this backyard yourself." I nodded. He whistled. That adds real value, not just aesthetic, functional equity. Clarissa heard that too. Her face paled. Reality was sinking in. She couldn't erase me with a lock change. She couldn't bury me under trash bags. I was still here, still counted, and the walls knew my name. I started gathering my things more deliberately, reclaiming pieces. The books she tried to donate, I rescued. The ceramic anniversary mug, I glued it back together. Not because I wanted it, but because she needed to see what mending looked like. Then came the court reevaluation. 30 days had passed. We walked into that courtroom again. Same judge, same worn mahogany bench. Melissa laid it all out line by line. Dollar by dollar, photos, emails, voicemails, financial records showing my consistent contributions. Clarissa had no response, just flimsy comments about how I was only helping or just being generous. The judge didn't blink. She tapped her pen again once, twice. "Ms. Price," she said, "based on the documentation, I find your contributions substantial and continuous. I am awarding you 47% equity in the property. Additionally, you are entitled to retroactive compensation for utility payments and physical labor that directly increased the home's value." Clarissa choked on her own breath. 47%. Not half, but almost. Almost enough to make her feel the pressure of everything she tried to steal. I didn't smile, just nodded again. That number meant I could force a sale if I wanted, or buy her out. Either way, I wasn't powerless anymore. Outside the courthouse, she followed me. "You think you've won?" she hissed. I turned to her, still calm. "I think I've recovered," I said. "There's a difference." I left her standing there, the wind catching her hair like a shredded flag. Back at the house, I sat on the porch. For the first time in months, I breathed without weight. But the story didn't end there. The court gave us 60 days to negotiate what to do with the house. She wanted to buy me out, said she'd get a loan, said she had help. I agreed. I gave her a timeline. Terms, fair. But she missed the first deadline, then the second, and then I discovered through a mutual friend that she was trying to refinance using forged bank statements. I didn't even get mad. I just forwarded the evidence to Melissa. Another hearing? Another document? This time it was a formal request for forced sale. 60 days later, the house was listed. Buyers came, asked questions, loved the kitchen, loved the light. One of them, a couple from Atlanta, offered full asking. Clarissa begged me to reconsider, said she'd lose everything. And for a moment, I almost hesitated. But then I remembered that night on the porch. Her wine glass, her smirk, her voice telling me, "You don't live here anymore." So I signed the papers. The house was sold. I walked out with my percentage, my closure, my story intact. She thought she'd won, until I showed up with a court order, until I reclaimed my name in silence. And sometimes silence is the loudest revenge of all. The day the house officially sold, I didn't cry. I thought I would. thought I might feel some kind of emotional rupture as I handed over the keys to strangers, watched the front door close one final time, behind people who had no idea what that house had held. But I didn't cry, because I had already done my grieving, not for the walls or the furniture or the garden I built with my bare hands, but for the version of me who thought love was enough. She was gone. And in her place stood a woman who knew her worth in contracts, in court, in silence. Clarissa disappeared not long after the sale, moved back in with her mother in Decatur. According to someone who still followed her private Instagram, she posted a quote the day escrow closed. "Sometimes you have to lose everything to find yourself." I almost laughed, almost because she hadn't lost everything. She lost what she stole. There's a difference. As for me, I moved into a small loft in downtown Savannah. Brick walls, big windows, no ghosts. I started over, not as someone rebuilding, but as someone reclaiming. But the story wasn't finished. You see, I thought the house was the end, the final battle. But betrayal has a ripple effect. And Clarissa had left me with more than emotional damage. She left me with debt. Turns out, during the last year of our relationship, Clarissa had opened 2 credit cards in my name, maxed them out, used them for home improvements she later claimed were hers, for shopping sprees, even for booking a luxury weekend trip in Charleston, the same weekend she told me she was working late. I only found out when I applied for a small business loan, something I had been dreaming about since college. The loan officer looked me in the eye and said, "Your credit score's taken a hit. Do you have any existing delinquent accounts?" I blinked. "I don't have any credit cards." He showed me the screen. 2 open accounts, thousands in charges, missed payments, and both under the name Janelle Price. I couldn't breathe. It was like the locks all over again, except this time. It wasn't my house being taken. It was my name. I walked out of that bank with shaking hands and fire in my throat. I went straight to Melissa. She listened, jaw tightening with every word. "This is identity theft," she said. "We're not just talking about revenge anymore. We're talking about a felony." I filed a police report that same day, pulled my full credit report, contacted the banks, the collections agencies. The evidence was everywhere. Her email linked to the statements, her phone number for confirmations, even her voice on the customer service call recordings pretending to be me. Clarissa Dale had impersonated me, lied in my name, racked up debt under my identity. But this time, I didn't just want compensation. I wanted accountability. We pressed charges, and when the court summons landed in her mailbox, according to the process server who handed it over, she cried. Real tears. Too late. I testified in front of a grand jury, shared every detail, every forged bill, every false statement. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about truth. And truth, when spoken clearly, echoes. The jury indicted her on 2 felony counts of identity theft and 1 count of financial fraud. She pled not guilty. Of course she did. But the evidence spoke louder than her denial. In court, she sat 2 rows away from me, her hair limp, her eyes sunken, no lipstick, no smirk. And when the judge read the verdict, "You're guilty on all counts," she looked at me for the first time, not as prey, but as someone she never really understood. I didn't gloat. I didn't flinch. I just watched her realize what it felt like to be seen. She received 2 years probation, court-mandated restitution, and a felony record that would follow her for the rest of her life. People asked me if I felt satisfied, if that was the closure I needed. But closure isn't a courtroom. It's quieter than that. It came later when I opened my mailbox and saw the approval letter from the bank. Loan granted? Dream greenlit. I used it to open my own design studio. Rose and brick interiors. Named after the first things I ever fought for the garden I planted and the house I reclaimed. We specialize in emotional spaces, homes filled with story, grit, and light. Clients often ask, why the name? And I smile, because I know the answer. Because pain, when turned into beauty, never goes out of style. Some nights, when I lock up the studio and walk past the quiet riverfront, I remember her voice. That night on the porch, "You don't live here anymore." She was right, in a way. I don't live there anymore. I live here. In truth, in strength, in the kind of peace that only comes when you take back everything that was stolen and build something stronger in its place. So no, she didn't win. Not even close. She thought she had the final word, But the final word was mine. And it was guilty. They say the best revenge is living well. But I don't believe in cliches. Revenge, to me, isn't about living well. It's about living free, free from the lies, free from the shame, free from the quiet, invisible chains someone else tried to wrap around your life. After the court case ended and Clarissa was sentenced, the headlines died down. People moved on. Even she disappeared into silence. No more social media posts. No more brunch selfies. No more backyard celebrations in a house that no longer belonged to her. And I started living, truly living. My design studio, Rose and Brick, became more than a business. It became a kind of sanctuary. Women came to me with stories, divorces, betrayals, losses. Every wallpaper we picked, every rug we laid down, it wasn't just decoration, it was healing. It turns out, my story had traveled farther than I thought. An article in a local women's magazine featured me under the headline, "She was locked out, now she builds homes that can't be taken." I didn't even know they were writing it. A former client had submitted the pitch. When it came out, something shifted. People started reaching out. Women I didn't know, strangers from other cities. They sent emails, letters, DMs. "Thank you for fighting. Your silence spoke for all of us. I left him after reading about you." At first, I didn't know what to say, but then I realized maybe my revenge had already evolved into something bigger. Not destruction, but construction, not payback, but power. One day, I got a letter from a law student in North Carolina. She said she was writing her thesis on legal protection for unmarried domestic partners, especially in property law. She titled it The Janelle Doctrine. I laughed when I saw that, but a deep part of me also cried, because for the first time in my life, I saw that being erased didn't mean I disappeared. It meant I made space for something better. Clarissa still owed restitution. I received small payments every month, court-ordered, automatic, impersonal. I didn't check the amounts. I just let them pile into a savings account I named Future Fire. Not because I wanted fire, but because I was ready to light something new. By my second year of business, Rose and Brick expanded. I hired 2 junior designers, got featured in Southern Living. One of our spaces went viral on Pinterest. Suddenly, people started calling me an entrepreneur. It felt strange. Not long ago, I was the woman outside the locked door, carrying trash bags. Now I was the woman unlocking doors for others. One afternoon, while driving home from a consult, I passed the old street. The house was still there. New paint, a different porch light. Someone had removed the rose bushes. I winced at that. I parked across the street. Just watched. It didn't hurt like I thought it would. Because that house, it didn't hold me anymore. It held a story, and I had already rewritten the ending. Still, I left something behind that day. I reached into my purse, pulled out a small white envelope. Inside was a handwritten note, 5 words. I was never disposable. I slid it under the mailbox. Not for the new owners, not for Clarissa, but for the universe, because some stories need to be told all the way to the last word. And speaking of last words, you might wonder what happened to her. Clarissa, she tried to start over, tried rebranding herself in Atlanta as a home consultant, even used a new last name. But the internet remembers, Google remembers, court records remember, and most of all, she remembers. Because every time someone brings up her name, the question comes next. Didn't you used to live with Janelle Price? Her legacy became a footnote in mine, and mine, still being written, in the form of grants I now sponsor for young women starting over. In the landlord-tenant legal seminars I've spoken at, yes, me, with a microphone, telling my story in rooms full of attorneys. In the look on a client's face when I say, yes, you deserve to feel safe in your own space. So no, the best revenge isn't living well. It's living loud enough to echo through the walls they tried to bury you behind. It's signing the deed in your own name. It's knowing that you didn't just survive the storm, you became the architect of your own shelter. And brick by brick, you built something unshakable.